Welcome to the Greater Essex County District School Board's presentation on making IEP goals and expectations meaningful, measurable, and manageable. The information contained in this presentation is compiled from the documents provided by the Ontario Ministry of Education and adapted from the Alberta Education Learning and Teaching Resource Branch and are referred to in this presentation. Please refer to the Ontario Ministry of Education website for the most up-to-date documents. This is the second in a series of presentations designed to support teachers in understanding the IEP process and writing effective IEPs. The goals and objectives component of the IEP provide a functional, working document that a teacher can use in planning, developing, implementing, and assessing programming for individual students. Goals and expectations that are meaningful and measurable allow teachers to plan, organize, and deliver instruction to meet those goals and expectations and increase students' chances to be successful. Meaningful and measurable goals and expectations also ensure that teaching staff have the same expectation for what the student will be doing over the course of the school year and makes it easier to communicate what progress the student has made. Many schools refer to the SMART acronym to outline the characteristics of a meaningful and measurable goal or expectation. Annual goals are more general than expectations, but should be specific enough to provide direction. An annual goal is a statement of a specific outcome that a student could realistically be expected to accomplish in one academic year. An annual goal is a positive statement that describes an outcome of what the student will accomplish and must connect to the expectations. It will allow the teaching staff to determine with certainty whether or not the student has achieved the goal. Annual goals are determined at the beginning of the school year for an identified student on a modified IEP or within 30 school days after the IPRC placement date. As with all areas of the IEP, annual goals may be updated throughout the year based on the student's progress. Annual goals must be measurable, quantifiable, and observable for language, math, French, and alternative subjects. Annual goals must be observable for all other subjects, for example, social studies. Well-written expectations describe concrete, teachable components. Daily instruction is then geared toward achieving the expectations, and assessment is based on progress of meeting the expectation goals. Since goals and expectations are based on the needs of the individual student, they vary greatly from one student to the next. Goals and expectations need to be meaningful to students, their families, and school programming, and ultimately result in increasing independence and skills. Please note, it is beneficial to complete expectations on the IEP for all of Term 1 by the September 30th deadline as set by the Superintendent of Special Education. Teachers report on the progress of the expectations for the progress report and the achievement of the expectations for the Term 1 report card. Throughout the term, it may be necessary to adjust and update the expectations as required. Term 2 expectations are to be completed and communicated to parents with the Term 1 report card. Expectations are the stepping stone between the current level of performance and the annual goal. Each modified strand should include 2 to 3 well-written expectations and 3 to 6 expectations for other subject areas and alternative programs. However, this may vary depending on the individual needs of the student. The annual goals and expectations should be closely tied to a student's strengths and areas of need as per the IPRC statement. Expectations state specific knowledge and/or skills a student will demonstrate independently by the end of the reporting period and are reviewed and revised each term. What do we mean by measurable terms? This means that someone else could read the expectation and know specifically what it is the student should achieve or demonstrate. Measuring means performing an action of some type. For example, to measure one's weight, you would stand on a scale. To measure how fast someone runs, time them. Two important questions to keep in mind when writing measurable goals and objectives are: what do we want the student to be able to do? How will we know that the student has accomplished this? Expectations should be written with enough detail to clearly delineate the outcome. A measurable expectation should answer, can this student do this? Yes or no? So let's put it together and look at some annual goal examples. Once again, An annual goal is a statement that describes what the student can accomplish by the end of the year. Avoid vague annual goals that may include statements such as improve reading comprehension, increase on-task behavior, improve math skills. These statements are written in an open-ended or subjective manner and do not provide a tangible benchmark of where the student is currently functioning or a clear direction for planning. These type of statements are not functional for the student or the teacher and make it difficult to determine whether or not the student has achieved the goal. Please take a minute to review the examples of meaningful and measurable annual goals in this slide. It is sometimes helpful to take the annual goal and work backwards to break it down into incremental steps or expectations for each reporting period. Modified curriculum can be reach back, which means at a lower grade level, or could be simplified, which means reduced expectations but at grade level. In the case of gifted IEPs, outcomes may look at the breadth, depth, and complexity of curriculum expectations. For alternative expectations, a task analysis of expected outcomes may assist in breaking down tasks into measurable parts. Some points to remember. On the IEP, all subjects should be listed and noted as accommodated or modified. The previous grade from the June report card must be included for all modified strands and a comment for alternative subject areas. Each expectation requires a separate box. Teaching strategies and assessment must correlate with the learning expectations. A connection between the IEP and the alternative report card must be explicit. Expectations should include a clear indication of the action, context, terms, and timeline. It is helpful to remember the acronym ACT. Each of these components are essential for expectations to be measurable. The first element of measurable expectations is action. Action refers to what the student will know or be able to do, such as identify the main character in a story, write numerals 1 to 10, complete a written assignment, or speak in a calm voice. Context refers to when, where, or under what conditions the student will do the action, such as in daily reading assignments, in lit circles, from the board, independently, with verbal prompts, or with physical prompts, with other students during group work activities. Terms is the criteria for successful achievement. How well, how many times, or how long the student is expected to perform the task, such as for 5 minutes 2 times daily, on 2 occasions during a 1-week period, for 15 minutes each day, on 2 to 3 submitted assignments, daily during lit circles. The standard of performance is often determined by the nature of the task. Complete mastery of the task may not be essential before proceeding to the next task. Remember, it is rare that a student would be expected to complete a task with 100% accuracy at all times, with the exception of some behaviors related to safety. Be sure to choose a unit of measurement that is meaningful to the students and teachers. Units such as 4 out of 5 days is more realistic than percentages. Our board has moved away from percentages as it is difficult to record such data accurately. Timeline is the expected achievement date for an expectation. However, this may also be addressed in the annual goal and may or may not be included in the expectation. Some examples include by the end of the unit, by the end of the term, by October. At this time, if you have downloaded and created the table task activity, please pause at this slide to complete it. If not, please continue with the presentation. Find the expectations in your envelope and place under the correct heading: action, context, terms, timeline. When you have completed the activity, press play and review the answers. We will review 3 annual goals and corresponding measurable expectations for each and indicate how they identify the action, context, terms, and timeline if applicable. Here is an annual goal for literacy. By June 2016, Robert will achieve a level 24 or higher on DRA. He will increase his comprehension skills to a mid-grade 1 level. Robert will increase his independent reading skills to 20 minutes during daily reading. He will respond weekly in his reading response journal. The action for expectation 1 is Robert will read level 18 on a DRA. Context, with guided practice and independence. Terms, weekly during small group instruction. And finally, timeline, by the end of term 1. The first expectation is related to the goal of level 24 or higher on the DRA. Note that level 18 is a stepping stone to level 24, and this may be a term 1 expectation. The expectation on the IEP for term 1 will read, weekly, during small group instruction and with guided practice, Robert will independently read DRA 18 by the end of term 1. Again, for the same annual goal, but this expectation is related to his comprehension level, with a specific goal of identifying the story problem. Action: Robert will begin to demonstrate comprehension of text read to him by identifying the story problem. Context: writing in his reading response journal. Terms: weekly. IEP expectation: Robert will begin to demonstrate comprehension of text read to him by identifying the story problem and writing in his reading response journal on a weekly basis. Note that the timeline isn't necessary in this case, and also that the wording of the expectation does not necessarily need to be in the order of action, context, and term. Here we have the same annual goal and a third measurable expectation related to his literacy goal. Action: we'll select a leveled fiction text. Context: to read independently. Terms: for 10 minutes daily. The IEP expectation: during daily reading, Robert will read independently for 10 minutes from a leveled fiction text. Note again that the expectation is a stepping stone to the annual goal of reading for 20 minutes independently. Next, we have a math annual goal. By June 2016, Daniel will develop and apply numerical and problem-solving skills at the grade 5 level, focusing on fewer and less complex expectations. Daniel will round numbers to the nearest 1,000th. He will add and subtract up to 4-digit whole numbers with and without regrouping. Daniel will read and represent money amounts up to and including $100. He will multiply whole numbers to 10. Action: will round whole numbers to the nearest 100th. Context: using number charts and manipulatives. Terms: accurately in 4 out of 5 assessments. IEP expectation: Daniel will round whole numbers accurately in 4 out of 5 assessments to the nearest 100th using number charts and manipulatives. Note, it clearly lays out the expectation, how the student is going to accomplish the task, and how it will be assessed. Here is another expectation for the same annual goal that addresses addition without regrouping as a stepping stone to the annual goal of 4-digit addition and subtraction with regrouping. Action: we'll add 4-digit whole numbers without regrouping. Context: in his math journal. Terms: daily. The expectation reads, Daniel will add 4-digit whole numbers without regrouping daily in his math journal. The next expectation relates to reading money amounts. Action: we'll read money amounts up to $50. Context: verbally and with independence. Terms: daily during structured learning activities. The IEP expectation reads, Daniel will verbally read money amounts up to $50 with independence during daily structured learning activities. Note the context is that the student will read verbally the money amounts to $50 with the next outcome to read and represent money amounts to $100. This expectation is typical for a student in a Gains or STEPS program on an alternative IEP. Annual goal: By June 2016, Sarah will read 30 words of a personalized word list related to daily living skills. Action will match the words stop, exit, push, pull, women's washroom. Context, using Boardmaker picks with corresponding words. Terms, correctly during structured learning activities. The IEP expectation would read, using Boardmaker picks with corresponding words, Sarah will correctly match the words stop, exit, push, pull, women's washroom. Note that the expectation specifies the words the student is to learn and that the action is matching, with the overall goal being to read the words. If the goal is too difficult to obtain, it can be adjusted to reflect the student's progress. Typical curriculum goals are too global and when deconstructed can contain numerous expectations. Take the example of a grade 3 writing expectation. It is essential to know where the starting point is for your student. The curriculum expectation may not be specific enough to address an identified student's needs. Here is the expectation directly from the curriculum. Use punctuation to help communicate their intended meaning with a focus on the use of quotation marks to indicate direct speech, commas to mark grammatical boundaries within sentences, capital letters and final punctuation to mark the beginning and end of sentences. If punctuation is the goal, then determine the action based on where the student is currently progressing. For example, your student's starting point might be action. Sue will proofread sentences and correct for punctuation, capitals, periods. Context, daily in her writing journal. Terms, with cues using an editing checklist and success criteria. IEP expectation, with cues using an editing checklist and success criteria, Sue will proofread sentences and correct for punctuation, capitals, periods, daily in her writing journal. Here's another example of a deconstructed expectation, this time a French expectation. Take a moment to review this expectation directly from the curriculum. Here's an example of a deconstructed French writing expectation. Sue will create a poster with a minimum of 5 labels, a graphic, and must be related to the specific topic. Context, following read aloud. Terms, with cues using a word wall or personal dictionary. The IEP expectation reads, following a read aloud, Sue will use her personal dictionary or word wall to create a poster with a minimum of 5 labels and a graphic that is related to the story just read. Let's look at some examples of vague learning expectations that are not written as performance tasks. Are the goals measurable and observable? Notice the detail in the clear expectations that follow the ACT model and answers the question, can the student achieve this expectation? Yes or no? Take a minute to review the differences in expectations. Please review the next slide and observe the specific, clear learning expectations that easily answer the question, can this student achieve this expectation? Yes or no? Please turn to your partner and using the ACT, action, context, terms, and timeline model, review the following vague expectations and create expectations that are observable, measurable, and meaningful. Here are a couple of helpful links when writing IEPs. We hope that you find this presentation helpful when writing an IEP. Please view the next presentation in this series on transition planning and the IEP. Thank you.